Hey there, this is Middle-Aged Nerd Seeks Genre. I'm Cody. Welcome back to the channel. So this video is all about books that slay, and it's inspired by an anthology I'm currently reading called Slay: Stories of the Vampire Noir. This book is being published by Mocha Memoirs Press, and it is a collection of short stories that are all about vampires of the African diaspora. This is a really cool anthology, and it takes the vampire story in places I've never really seen it go before. And it brings together a bunch of writers who are drawing from not just the vampire mythology, but other kind of cultural and mythological foundations that don't normally show up in vampire fiction, and creating this new abundance of stories that take the vampire myth in a lot of really cool directions. So far, I'm really enjoying the stories in Slay. They're unusual, they're creative, they're disturbing and dark and funny and sexy. Really, all the things that you come to expect from a vampire story, you can find in these stories. But it's also giving you a window into a different cultural approach to this mythology, and 100% worth grabbing. I think if you love vampire stories, you need to make sure that Slay gets added to your collection. I think you're going to leave this collection very happy if you add it to your shelf. So check out Slay: Stories of the Vampire Noir, published by Mocha Memoirs Press. So while we're on the subject of slaying, I recently reread Stephen Graham Jones's The Last Final Girl. If you are a fan of Stephen Graham Jones, you know that he has a great respect for the slasher film. And The Last Final Girl is in many ways like a love letter to slasher films. It's a story of this girl who survives a slasher. She is a final girl, and this killer has kind of killed her entire homecoming court, so she has to gather she gets the honor, the privilege of putting together a new homecoming court. And she brings together a bunch of girls who have maybe also survived slashers, they're other final girls, and this ragtag bunch of girls have to end up fighting a slasher themselves, and they're battling it out to be the only final girl left. What's really cool about this is the way Jones decides to tell the story. It reads a bit like a screenplay, including like quick cuts and edits. It's treated as though it's a film. The narrative voice is like if you were sitting next to your friend on the couch narrating what happens in a horror flick. That's how this book is presented, and it's a really clever narrative approach and really a ton of fun. As is true of every Stephen Graham Jones story, it's a wildly unique perspective. It's a wildly fresh and original voice. Nobody writes like Stephen Graham Jones. And The Last Final Girl is his absolute Valentine to everything slasher and everything final girl. He knows the genre, and he knows how to take you on a wild horror ride. So definitely a book that slays 100% is The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. Another book that slays is Adam Caesar's Clown in a Cornfield, which is one of the big releases this year. So in a nutshell, Clown in a Cornfield is about kids in this town. They're out in a cornfield. There is a killer clown who is after them, and it works in all the wonderful ways that slasher films of this kind work. What's cool about Clown in a Cornfield, though, is that this sort of traditional setup opens up to some other surprises along the way. You know, Caesar has got more on his mind than just, a slice 'em and dice 'em slasher story. He brings in some interesting narrative twists, he brings in some fun character developments, and he throws in some social commentary too that's also interesting. It makes Clown in a Cornfield a really, really fun time. Out of all the books that I've read, out of all the horror books that I've read this year, I feel like Clown in a Cornfield was the most like a roller coaster ride to me. It and Night of the Mannequins were the ones that just felt like a rocket and roll good time of a book. So this is a spooky season. If you're looking for a book that's just going to be a quick, fun read that will not disappoint in any of the horror buttons, Clown in a Cornfield is definitely a book for you. My last book that slays is Riley Sager's Final Girls. Now, I am a very big fan of Riley Sager, and this was the first book of Riley's that I ever encountered. Final Girls is the story of these women who are themselves final girls. They've survived these slashers, basically, in life. And they sort of know each other, but not really. They have these they're tenuously connected by their existence as final girls. And something terrible happens to one of them. And so the other final girls that are left have to go on the journey to sort of figure out what has happened to her and to make sure that what happened to her doesn't happen to them as well. This is a book that is really a thriller. A mystery thriller, basically, not so much like a straight up horror novel, but it absolutely pays great respect to the traditions and the conventions of slashers. Riley Sager is a slasher film fan, particularly those of the 2000s and the 90s and the 2000s, and you can see that in Final Girls. I had a great time with this book. The mystery's fun, the writing is fun. There's something very fresh and compelling about the way Sager crafts his thrillers and his surprises. I think if you are unfamiliar with his work, it's a great place to start. And it's a wonderful book. If you do love horror films, you certainly will get your money's worth by reading Final Girls. I had a great time with it. So those are my books that slay. Make sure that you check them out. They're all really terrific. And make sure that you keep your eye open for Slay, Stories of the Vampire Noir from Mocha Memoirs Press. And add it to your bookshelf when it comes out. As always, I'm really appreciative of you hanging out with me. If you like what's happening, like, subscribe, click the button, share the video, tell other people about what's going on over here. And I look forward to talking to you about genre books in the next video. Bye.